full set of Spider-Man is up. You can check it all out over at MTGPreviews.com. So let's break down the rest of the rares and mythics and even a few lower rarity cards from the set. Hello everyone, it's Seth, probably better known as Saffron Olive, and it's time for one final edition of Spider-Man spoilers. So we've reached the end of Spider-Man spoiler season. The whole set is up, you can go check it out over at MTGPreviews.com, but we still have a few pretty interesting cards to talk about today, which means we should probably jump right into it, start dogging Spider-Man cards. Before we do, a couple of quick reminders. First, if you need any of these cards, you can snag them from our sponsor Card Kingdom over at cardkingdom.com/MTGGoldfish. Second, to keep up on all the latest previews throughout the day, you should head on over to MTGPreviews.com. Anyway, let's talk one more time about Spider-Man. First up today, we get Silk the Web Spinner, a new 4-mana Selesnya 3/5 legendary spider-human hero. It has Web-Slinging of 3, so get into play on the cheap if you bounce a tapped creature back to your hand. Then it says whenever you cast a creature spell, create a 1/1 green and white human citizen creature token, and then you can pay 5 to give creatures you control +2/+2 and gain vigilance until end of turn. So Silk, very similar to some cards that we've seen in Standard in the recent past. Like right now we got Saval in Standard, is a 4-drop that when you cast a creature, you get a 1/1 mercenary that can tap to pump things, and then it can make a bunch of mana. We had Torrens in Standard not that long ago, a 3-drop that when you cast a creature, you make a 1/1 and it has training. And these are cards that honestly have just not seen play in Standard. Saval is currently in Standard, sees no play. I've never seen anyone play the card. Torrens I was actually kind of hyped about when it was spoiled, but it turned out it just actually wasn't good enough and no one ended up playing it. And I don't think the upside of Silk, which is the 5-mana pump your creatures mode, kind of the Sunscape Master mode, is enough to really change that equation. So I think in Standard, Silk probably not really going to be playable. That said, Web-Slinging, of course, does work really well with mana dorks, where you can Llanowar Elves and then tap it and pick it back up. You could be getting this into play on turn 2, technically, which is really fast. So if this does work in Standard, I imagine that's how it's going to work. That you turn 1 Llanowar, turn 2, you play your land drops, you have 3 mana, tap the Llanowar, pick it up to Silk, and then next turn you start casting your creatures, popping off. So maybe Web-Slinging is enough to like change the equation compared to the other versions of this effect, but I'm still pretty skeptical that this card's going to be Standard good. So where is this card good? And I think the easiest home is in Go Wide Human Commander decks. If you're playing like Kyler or Catilda, this is a human that makes humans. Your deck just wants a ton of humans on the battlefield. And then in Commander, it's not unrealistic that you get up to 10 mana eventually and maybe double activate, pump your team +4/+4, get in 1 big attack to win the game. So I think that's the most obvious home. Also good if you have like a best deck that just cares about 1/1s entering the battlefield. So I think that's what you're really looking for with Silk. So Silk, we've seen a lot of cards very similar to this in the recent past. Traditionally, they haven't been very good in Standard. Maybe Web-Slinging and that get it down turn 2 Llanowar Elves is enough to change the equation on this card. We'll have to wait and see. Worst case, seems like a very solid Commander card in those Go Wide Human decks. We also got our banned rare land from this set. And I gotta say that the 2 rare lands are actually probably my favorite part of this entire set. They're both super unique, they both seem super powerful. So one of the questions people had when we saw Oscorp Industries a few days ago was, are we getting a full cycle of these lands? Well, now we know the answer is no. We're only getting 2 of these lands in the Spider-Man set, because we got the full set now. But I will say, I think we probably get a cycle eventually. I would not be surprised if this is a cycle that's split up between multiple Marvel sets. So we get a couple in Spider-Man, and then who knows, maybe go X-Men or Avengers or something in the future, we get another one there. So I wouldn't be surprised if this ended up being a cycle in the long run. We're just not getting the rest of them now. So Urban Retreat, I actually really like this card. It's a land, it makes BAMP mana, it enters tapped, but its ability is you can pay 2, return a tapped creature you control to its owner's hand, put the card from your hand onto the battlefield, activate it only as a sorcery. So Urban Retreat is essentially a land that has ninjutsu or web-slinging, and I think this card could be really powerful. So in Standard, turn 1 you play Llanowar Elves, turn 2 you make your land drop, you got 3 mana, you tap your Llanowar Elves, you bounce it back to your hand, you put Urban Retreat into play, and then you just replay the Llanowar Elves, and then you're untapping on turn 3 with what, 5 mana or something? And that's the power of Urban Retreat, is because you're just putting it into play from your hand, it doesn't count as your land drop for the turn. So it's essentially a ramp spell that's on a land. Of course, you can also just play it like a normal land, and then it's a Seaside Citadel, just to tap tri-land. So I think the synergy with something like Llanowar Elves and early Mana Dorks could make this card really good. It also has some synergy with Landfall. Since this doesn't count as your land drop for the turn, this is a way you can get an extra land in play to trigger your Tifa Lock card or your Bristly Bill. So maybe it shows up in some of the Landfall decks. The only thing with Landfall is, outside of Llanowar Elves, I'm not sure what creature you want to be bouncing back to your hand to put this into play, but still, Tifa triggers are so powerful, and getting one more can be representing like 8 power, 16 power once the deck gets going, that any way to put an extra land into play is notable. Plus, the current builds of Landfall are often in Teamer, so yeah, you can't really use the white mana, but having both green and blue mana is relevant there. It also could be good in some sort of Pixie Shell. It's kind of funny. If you look at the Pixie decks, you don't really care about the Bant mana, although the white mana is good, but this is another way that you can pick up your Nurturing Pixie or your Sun Petal Kieran, and having a land that can do that is really powerful. So if you never played against Pixie, the whole idea is you play Pixie to pick up an enchantment and replay the enchantment to reuse its Enters trigger, and you just keep bouncing your own stuff for value, and having a land that just lets you ninjutsu one of your creatures, essentially, especially since the Pixie creatures tend to have flying, seems really powerful there. You just play your Pixie, bounce something, replay it, attack with the Pixie, then post-combat Urban Retreat, pick it up, replay your Pixie, pick up something else. So it plays right into the endless value loop of those Pixie-style decks. Once you get back to older formats, this card's kind of absurd with Arboreal Grazer. So imagine turn 1, you play, man, I hate this card. It never works for me, but it works for other people. You play Arboreal Grazer, you put extra land into play. On turn 2, you attack with the Arboreal Grazer. Even though it has no power, it's a 0/3, so it probably won't die in combat. So you attack with Grazer. Post-combat, you can pick up the Grazer, put the Urban Retreat into play, then you can replay the Arboreal Grazer, put another land into play. It is just a ridiculous turbo ramp plan. So I think in the right deck, there could even be potential for this card in like Scapeshift decks and Pioneer, maybe even back to Modern in some decks. It is a super powerful effect. In Commander, the biggest issue with this card is just color identity. I think this card is legitimately great in any sort of Mana Dork style deck in Commander, and it's even fine outside of Mana Dork style decks, because in Commander, people play Seaside Citadel, and this is just literally Seaside Citadel with upside, but if you're in a 3-color deck, people still play Seaside Citadel. So I think this card is good in any Bant deck, but it goes even more up in value if you're a deck like Chulane, which loves Mana Dorks because you just want as many creatures as possible. Maybe like a Bant Elf deck like Galadriel. Derevi has tons of creatures, Toko has tons of creatures. So if you're a deck that's putting creatures into play early, this card becomes even better because it's a Seaside Citadel that can also be a ramp spell, which is just a ton of value on a land. So Urban Retreat, super unique land. Shout out to Wizards. The land design on both of the rare lands in this set are so unique, so good, so flavorful. Really, really love it. And I think this card should be really good, potentially in 60-card formats, and definitely in Commander. We also got a new equipment in Biorganic Carapace. So this is a 4-mana Azorius equipment. It says when it enters, attach it to target creature you control, and then equipped creature gets +2/+2 and has, whenever this creature deals combat damage to a player, draw a card for each modified creature you control. So modified is a creature that has an equipment on it, an aura on it, or a counter on it. So Biorganic Carapace, I don't know what to make of this card. So as far as competitive 60-card formats are concerned, I think it's probably not great. It kind of compares to sort of Fire and Ice, Buster Sword, Rogue's Gloves, these equipment that allow you to draw a card when the creature deals combat damage. The problem with Biorganic Carapace is it's 4 mana, and then you also have to get in combat damage with the card, and unlike something like sort of Fire and Ice, you're not getting any protection, any evasion. The upside of the card is if you're in a modified deck, then this card can pop off. If you have 2 creatures, or 3 creatures, or 4 creatures that are modified, then this card can be drawing you an entirely new hand. So I think this card probably isn't really designed to work in 60-card formats. I don't know, maybe we build some crazy modified deck where this card is absolutely busted, but to me this mostly feels like a card that's designed to be good in Commander, because in Commander, the big problem in 60-card formats is you only got one opponent, right? And you play this 4-mana equipment, you gotta put it on a creature, and then that creature has to get in for combat damage. That's a big ask, but in Commander, you have 3 opponents, so you can just attack whoever doesn't have the blocker. And this card, by itself, if you're not playing a deck with a bunch of modifiers, modified creatures, it's pretty mid. As we were talking about before, if it's just one creature, you might as well Buster Sword or Sword of Fire and Ice or even Rogue's Glove. But in a deck with a bunch of modified creatures like Falco Spara, all about having counters on things. Sonic the Hedgehog can put counters on all of your creatures with Blast or Haste when they enter. A Galadriel can put a counter on each creature you control. Decks like that, this card can be absolutely wild. If you have 4 or 5 creatures that have counters on them, suddenly this becomes an incredibly strong equipment that's drawing so many cards. Also seems good in like Arnikenrid, which is a modified equipment deck. Maybe you're playing like an aura heavy build of Zur the Enchanter, and your idea is to get a bunch of auras on all your creatures. It could work there as well. So I think Biorganic Carapace, not a card that I think is going to be good in standard or 60 card formats, but in those specific deck, +1/+1 counter decks, modified decks, equipment decks, the card might be legit powerful in Commander. We also got an intriguing new build around in Jackal Genius Geneticist. So it's a 2-mana Simic 1/1, legendary human scientist villain. It has trample, and it says whenever you cast a creature spell with mana value equal to its power, copy that spell, except it's not legendary, and then put a +1/+1 counter on Jackal. So what does this mean in practice? It means you play Jackal, and then you play a 1-drop, because it has 1 power, and you get 2 of that 1-drop instead of 1, and then you grow the Jackal, so now you need to cast a 2-drop, and then you get 2 of that 2-drop, so on and so forth. So this card can do some really explosive things. It kind of reminds me of Tawnos the Toymaker, Volo Guide to Monsters. If you want to go super deep, Riku with 2 reflections, but you got to pay mana for that, so it's not exactly the same. So the twist with Jackal is it's just way cheaper than the other commanders that do this. Like Tawnos is 5 mana to copy birds and bees. Volo is 4 mana, but only copy stuff that you don't already control one of those, or have one in the graveyard of that creature type. Jackal is just 2 mana, so it's a huge discount compared to other versions of this effect. But it comes with another downside, which is it's going to be a little tricky to use. You need the right mana value of creature to trigger it, and then you need the right mana value again the next turn. So it's going to be tricky to chain all that stuff together. And that makes me a little skeptical of this card, because we've seen cards in the past, like Imminent Doom, where people are kind of hyped about the card, but when you need to have like a 1 mana value play into a 2 mana value play into a 3 mana value play into a 4 mana value play, once you start playing those cards in practice, you find out they're just really tricky to use. Yes, the dream scenario is you drop a Jackal on turn 2, and then turn 3 you're like, all right, 1-drop Spyglass Iron, counter on Jackal, I get 2 Spyglass Irons, followed up with a 2-drop, now we have 2 counters on Jackal, I get 2 Keen-Eyed Curators or whatever. That is an incredibly strong start. That is a start that's going to put you super far ahead, and then you follow it up with a 3-drop the next turn and get 2 of those, and your Jackal's like a 4/4 trampler now. So the ceiling of this card is kind of busted, right? Like, when it works, this card is going to do incredibly powerful things. The problem is, when it doesn't work, it's going to be a 2-mana 1/1 that you're really sad about. Let's say rather than drawing Jackal on turn 2 and just having the perfect hand to do this nut drop, maybe draw turn 4 or turn 5. By that point, you probably have already played your 1-drops, so you might not even have a way to trigger this, and if you're waiting to like draw another 1-drop to get the party started with Jackal, it seems incredibly clunky. So I think this card is going to be fun to build around, and I think we're going to see games where Jackal just absolutely pops off and takes over, but I would be surprised if it was actually a consistently good deck, just because you really got to have it on turn 2 and have the right hand to make it work. The same is true in Commander, except in Commander, you can play Jackal as your commander, so you know you're always going to have access to it on turn 2, which greatly changes the equation. When you know you always have this card, then you can really go all in on building around it. And just like the value you can get out of it is super high. So how do you build around Jackal in Commander? The easiest way, I think, is just to play a mix of mana values. So make sure you get a bunch of 1-drops like Birds of Paradise and Friends. Make sure you have a bunch of 2-drops like Secure Tribelder. Make sure you have a bunch of 3-drops. And you just play Jackal and work your way up the curve, copying things as you go along. So I think that's the easiest way to do it. It also seems sweet with Panharmonicon effects. That's probably how I would build Jackal, is not only try to play the curve for Jackal, but play a bunch of ETB triggers. So you get double Pawn Prophet, then you get double Wood Elves, then you get double Starfield Vocalist, and then you're just really in business. The other possibility with this card, which is cute, is it's a sneaky good Hydra commander. So because Jackal cares about this spread of mana values, one of the ways you can cheat on this is playing X-Spell creatures. A card like Goldvein Hydra, or Poaching Hydra, or Hydra Crosses, Genesis Hydra, there's a ton of these cards, but these cards can be your 1-drop, your 2-drop, your 10-drop, your 20-drop. So no matter where you're at on the Jackal curve, turf, a Hydra is going to pretty much take care of that problem and get 2 copies, and it does work the way you want to. If you copy an X spell, the X is carried over for the new spell. So if you cast a Goldvein Hydra X5 or whatever, your copy is also going to be X5. It's not just going to be a 0/0 that dies when it hits the battlefield. So actually, even though it doesn't refer to Hydras in any specific way, it does work incredibly well with Hydras. So Jackal, I like this card a lot. I feel like this card, probably not a competitive card, but it's one of those cards that has my brewer's juices going. It just seems like it's going to be a fun deck building challenge to build around. I think in Commander, the card can be legit strong. In 60 card formats, it can be legit strong. I just don't know if it's going to be consistent enough to be like a real competitive deck. We also got our final rare or mythic from the Spider-Man set in Morlun, Devourer of Spiders. So Morlun, double black and X for a 2/1 legendary vampire villain. It is lifelink. It says when it enters with X counters on it, and when it enters, it deals X damage to target opponent. So Morlun, this card is essentially a super upgraded version of Maga Traitor to Mortals. Maga was essentially the same thing, but it was 3 mana and no lifelink. So if you're a fan of Maga, this essentially does everything Maga does, but way better. There is one twist, which is Maga causes players to lose life, while Morlun actually deals damage to the opponent, which in 99% of situations doesn't matter, but there are some fringe situations, like your opponent has a with great power on a creature, which says all damage that's dealt to them goes to the enchanted creature instead. In that scenario, Morlun won't actually damage your opponent. Maga would still make your opponent lose life though, but in a huge percentage of situations, the cards are basically the same, but Morlun's just better. So what do we do with Morlun? And the thing this kind of reminds me of most is like Grey Merchant of Asphodel at home. Grey Merchant, obviously, you need a big board to make it good, but because it drains everybody, it can do some ridiculous things in Commander. Morlun kind of cares about the opposite. It doesn't care about having a bunch of black mana symbols, a bunch of permanents on the battlefield. All Morlun wants is for you to have a ton of mana, and if you have enough mana, this can just kill your opponent all by itself. So in Standard, what do you do with this card? So I think there's a couple of plans. So one is, you just ramp a bunch. Maybe you're playing Overlord of the Hauntwoods, maybe you're doppelganging. If you can get up to 22 mana, this just 20s your opponent and wins you the game. This is also a great payoff for any infinite mana combo. So we've seen a few of these in Standard. They're not like competitive, but like Agatha's Soul Cauldron, Sleep Curse, Phase Shenanigans. So if you have a combo that makes infinite mana, obviously you dump the infinite mana into Morlun, it kills your opponent with a huge amount of damage, and you gain a huge amount of life. So I think those are the main homes for this card. But the more I think about this card, the more I'm like, wait a minute, can this just be a mono black card? Maybe you don't need to ramp, maybe you don't need a combo, maybe this card is just good. So if you think about it, it's a 2-mana 2/1 lifelink, which is not great. That's Child of Night, right? And then it's a 3-mana 3/2 lifelink, a 4-mana 4/3 lifelink, a 10-mana, I don't even know, 10/9 lifelink. But every spot on the curve, its stats are like kind of reasonable. They're not great, but they're reasonable. And once you get up a decent amount of mana, you're also getting the enters trigger. So if you're casting this for 10 mana or something, and it's dealing 8 damage to your opponent, you're gaining 8 life, and you're getting this 10 power lifelinker on the battlefield, that's actually kind of a wild card. And it does work with some of the payoffs that we already have in Black and Standard, like Bloodletter of Aklazatz is going to double any of the damage that you deal with Morlun, which makes it even more powerful. Like turn 4 Bloodletter into turn 5 Morlun, you end up with a 5/4 lifelinker that also hits your opponent for 6 and you gain 6 life. That actually seems kind of powerful. So maybe this is just good enough as a mono black card. In older formats, I'm actually very excited for this card. In Mono Black Devotion, one of my favorite like pioneer decks, historic decks, and even though Grey Merchant is really good in those decks, I think Morlun is going to be a great backup to Grey Merchant for a couple of reasons. So one is, you can just run it out as a 2-drop with double black mana symbols, so it's kind of free with Nykthos and a way to just up your black pips to make even more mana. The other is, with Nykthos, it is pretty realistic to make enough mana in one turn to kill your opponent with a single Morlun. Like getting up to 22 mana with like a double Nykthos draw, you can do that pretty easily. Plus, a lot of the devotion decks that I build have Bloodletter of Aklazatz anyway because it's got a bunch of pips, it works with Grey Merchant, so I think this might be a new mono black devotion staple. In Commander, I think there's a few options with this card. So like we talked about in Standard, if you can make infinite mana, this doesn't win you the game because you got more than one opponent, but it does kill a single player. So you take out whoever the archenemy is, whoever's in the lead. So a good infinite mana payoff. But I think this might just be good in black in general, especially in Commander. The most powerful black card is Cabal Coffers. It just makes a ridiculous amount of mana. Plus, black has all these mana doublers like Narcana Revenant that double your swamp mana. So it's pretty easy to make a ton of mana in black decks. So I could see Morlun being really good. Like if you make 10, 20 mana, this is a huge buffer for your life total, and it's dealing a ton of damage to one of your opponents, kind of like the same reason that Gray Merchant is really good in Commander. Like it's a way that you can gain a bunch of life and it lowers your opponent's life total a bunch. I think Morlun is in general worse than Gray Merchant. However, there's going to be situations where it's even better. The other interesting aspect of this card is it's a vampire. So I think you can definitely play this in vampire decks in Commander. It's going to be fine in basically any vampire deck, but it's probably best in Veto just because Veto has weird life gain shenanigans. If you have a Veto out, so whenever you gain life, target opponent loses that much life, you essentially double your Morlun damage, and that's actually really powerful because if you make enough mana, what it essentially means is Morlun can kill 2 opponents instead of 1. You kill one with Morlun's actual enters trigger, and then you kill a second one with Veto's ability, giving you that amount of damage over again. So I think Morlun, pretty good vampire card, especially in Veto. So all around, I gotta say Morlun, the more I think about this card, the more I like this card. The more I think this card could be a good Standard card, and it definitely seems like an absurd black card in Commander. Rounding things out today, we get the rest of the cards on the special Marvel sheet. Most interesting one, probably Saw in Half, coming to Arena for the first time. Saw in Half, not like a busted card, but it's just such a cool, fun design. So excited to have it for like Brawl and to be able to mess around with on Arena. We also have a handful of lore rarity cards worth shouting out. One is Secret Identity, 1 blue mana for an instant to choose one of. Until end of turn, target creature you control becomes a citizen with base power and toughness of 101 and gains hexproof until end of turn. Or until end of turn, target creature you control becomes a hero with base power and toughness of 3/4 and gains flying until end of turn. So Secret Identity, first off, nice little callback to Unmask, which it's kind of cool to see a little synergy here between a 20-year-old Magic set and a brand new Universes Beyond set, but it's kind of the same art as Unmask, and it's even the same artist as Unmask, where RK posted both of them. So I think that's really cool. The card itself, it's kind of a twist on Shore Up. So it's like a 1 blue mana protection spell, but you get the upside that it can also be kind of a pump spell. If you use it on a small creature, turn it into a 3/4 flyer. It's kind of like a giant growth mixed with a Shore Up, so I think it could serve a purpose in like some sort of I want to protect my creature style deck where you also want to force through some damage. We also got the Spots Portal, a 3 mana instant. It's a black card that says put target creature on the bottom of its owner's library. You lose 2 life unless you control a villain. And this card, if this was printed like 15 years ago, it would be the most hyped Commander card from the set. Because there used to be the Tuck rule in Commander, which was if your Commander got put into your library, you couldn't put it back in the command zone. So that made cards like Hinder staples in Commander because they were like semi-permanent answers to Commander. You just make your opponent shuffle in their deck, they can't play it again until they find it. Unfortunately for Spots Portal, that rule no longer exists, which means that this card probably isn't good enough, although it is notable that it does get rid of indestructible creatures. Like 3 mana, get rid of really anything isn't that bad, although is it better than something like Archenemy's Charm? Probably not. We also got Morbius the Living Vampire, a 4 mana 3/1 vampire scientist villain with flying and vigilance and lifelink, and then an interesting ability. Pay 2 mana in the Dimir colors, exile it from your graveyard, look at the top 3 cards of your library, put 1 in your hand, the rest go to the bottom in any order. So Morbius, not really excited about casting this card, like a 4 mana 3/1, even with 3 keywords. Not really good enough for Standard, but it's an interesting card in a self-mill deck, where it essentially allows you to exile it to anticipate from your graveyard. I was recently playing this like Season of Loss Icetail Explorer deck, where you just try to turbo mill yourself and win with Season of Loss. In a shell like that, some sort of heavy self-mill shell, I actually think Morbius could be pretty good, because you don't even want to cast it, you just mill it over and get value out of it from the graveyard. So I think it's interesting there at least. Of course, we also have a ton of Draft Chef. The full set is out. Go check it all out over at MTGPreviews.com. Anyway, that brings us to the end of not only our daily Spider-Man spoilers for today, but all of our Spider-Man spoilers. So now that you've seen the full set, what do you think? Where's your hype level? Is it up or down since the start of spoiler season? Are you buying a box? Are you buying singles? What card are you most excited to play? What decks are you building with the cards? Let me know in the comments. And of course, even though we're done with Spider-Man spoilers, we're still gonna have podcasts talking about the cards. Once the set actually drops, we'll have gameplay videos, so there'll still be a bunch more Spider-Man to come. So anyway, everyone, thanks for hanging out this spoiler season. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll be back, I guess, in a couple of months with some Avatar spoilers. So until then, have an amazing day, and I will talk to you soon. Looking for even more magic? Well, check out yesterday's spoiler video here, or maybe the deck that I built to try to beat Is It Cauldron in Standard.